In the evolving narrative of modern womanhood, the phenomenon of women choosing to live alone without men is not merely a social trend, but a profound psychological movement that reflects the deep individuation process Carl Jung described, a journey inward towards self-realization, autonomy, and wholeness. No longer confined by traditional gender roles that once defined women in relation to men, as wives, daughters, or mothers. These women are reclaiming their identities through solitude, engaging not in isolation, but in purposeful self-reflection and inner growth. Jung posited that the psyche seeks balance through the integration of the conscious and unconscious, and for women, solitude becomes the sacred space where the integration of the animus, the inner masculine, takes place. Freed from the habitual projection of strength, authority, and validation onto male figures, a woman living alone begins to embody those qualities herself, stepping into her full psychological potential. This is not a rejection of men, but rather a refusal to be incomplete without them. In her solitude, she meets the shadow, her suppressed desires, her silenced rage, her neglected ambitions. Jung emphasized that the shadow, when confronted, becomes a source of vitality, creativity, and transformation. And it is in this confrontation that many women begin to understand their deepest fears and reclaim disowned parts of themselves. The woman alone becomes both the nurturer and the warrior, the creator and the destroyer, the guide and the seeker. Archetypes long buried, like the wise woman, the hermit, or the alchemical queen, rise to the surface, guiding her toward depth, meaning, and inner sovereignty. Society may still cast suspicion on the woman who does not need a man, but from a Jungian lens, this is precisely her power. She has ceased to need externally what she is cultivating within. The anima and animus dance within her as equals, the inner marriage takes place, and she begins to move through the world not from lack, but from inner abundance. As she withdraws from conventional romantic scripts, she steps into archetypal realms often feared by patriarchal systems, the realm of inner wisdom, spiritual independence, and emotional self-sufficiency. The home of the solitary woman is not empty, but sacred. It is filled with symbols, reflections, and the quiet presence of her growing wholeness. In a culture obsessed with romantic fulfillment, she redefines what it means to be fulfilled, finding joy not in possession or performance, but in presence and authenticity. Jung might say she is undergoing the greatest adventure, the individuation process, not dependent on external relationships to complete her, but using every relationship, or absence thereof, as a mirror to deepen her connection to self. She becomes less defined by others and more defined by what arises within: intuition, insight, and imagination. She creates rituals, not routines, meaning, not just structure. And although this path can be lonely, it is also liberating. Carl Jung believed that wholeness was not found in perfection, but in embracing the totality of one's psyche, including the rejected, hidden, and forgotten parts. The woman who lives alone without a man becomes, in this light, a symbol not of loneliness, but of psychological maturity and spiritual independence. She is not incomplete. She is whole and becoming more whole. Her solitude is not a void, but a vessel, not a retreat from life, but a descent into its deepest layers. She dreams, she works, she heals, she reclaims. In her silence, she speaks volumes. In her independence, she redefines power. And in her aloneness, she is never truly alone, for she is accompanied by the richness of her own being, the echoes of archetypes past, and the quiet guidance of her emerging soul. This journey of the solitary woman is not only personal, but also collective. She carries within her the echoes of ancestral women who were denied the right to selfhood. Women who were burned as witches, silenced as hysterics, dismissed as spinsters. Her solitude, then, is not just her own, it is an ancestral reclamation. Jung believed that each individual participates in a greater psychic structure, the collective unconscious where archetypes reside. When a woman chooses to live without a man, especially in a society that still glorifies couplehood and external validation, she is often unconsciously confronting millennia of inherited roles and scripts. Her very act becomes a confrontation with the collective shadow, the cultural fear of the woman who is unowned, unruled, and unafraid. This fear often manifests in how society labels such women: lonely, bitter, broken, incomplete. But these projections reveal more about cultural anxieties than about the women themselves. From a Jungian standpoint, projections are unconscious displacements of our own unresolved content. When society projects negativity onto the solitary woman, it reveals its own unresolved dependence on outdated power structures and gender norms. Jung taught that confronting the shadow is essential for both personal and collective evolution. Therefore, the solitary woman, by embracing her independence, becomes a vessel for cultural transformation, one who lives out the unlived possibilities of generations before her. She also walks the path toward what Jung called the self, the totality of the psyche, which includes both conscious and unconscious elements. The self is the organizing principle of inner life. It represents the goal of individuation. For the woman who lives alone, especially by choice, life becomes an arena for this sacred encounter. She is no longer performing for the gaze of the other, but listening to the voice within. She asks deeper questions. Who am I beyond my roles? What does my soul long for? What is real, true, and mine? In doing so, she enters the realm of the symbolic, dreams, synchronicities, intuition, and begins to interpret her life not through the lens of society, but through the language of the soul. Jung asserted that symbols are the language of the unconscious. Solitude often gives space for those symbols to arise and speak. A dream of water may speak to emotional renewal. A sudden attraction to the moon may reveal a need for feminine wisdom. A recurring image of a locked door may signify a part of the psyche awaiting discovery. The woman living alone becomes her own analyst, priestess, and healer, decoding the mysteries within her through attention, patience, and ritual. As she evolves, she may experience what Jung called numinous moments, spiritual encounters that evoke awe, fear, and reverence. These moments are often misunderstood or dismissed in modern life, but for the solitary woman on her individuation path, they become guideposts. A sudden insight while walking alone, a tearful release under a full moon, a wordless knowing in a moment of silence. These are the whispers of the self guiding her home. She may begin to see her solitude not as a lack of love, but as a field of love's deeper, more spiritual dimension. She discovers a love that is not transactional, but transcendent. Of course, this journey is not without struggle. To live alone without a man is, in many ways, to live against the grain. The woman must learn to soothe herself when no one else is there. She must carry the weight of decisions, fears, and joys alone. She must face holidays, illnesses, and nights in silence. Yet these very challenges cultivate in her a profound resilience and trust in life. Jung wrote that only the paradox comes anywhere near to comprehending the fullness of life. The solitary woman lives that paradox. She is alone, yet deeply connected. She is independent, yet tender. She is unseen, yet luminous from within. Her life may not be understood by others, but it is deeply understood by her own soul. As she matures psychologically, she becomes less concerned with appearances and more committed to authenticity. Her friendships deepen, her work becomes more meaningful, her time becomes sacred. The quiet becomes her companion. She no longer fears the silence because she has met herself there. In mythology, such a woman might be likened to the goddess Hestia, keeper of the hearth and flame, an archetype of the inner sanctuary. Hestia did not marry, did not follow the path of drama or conquest, but remained centered, whole, and ever glowing. The solitary woman carries this archetypal energy. She is a guardian of her own inner fire. Her life may seem simple from the outside, but internally it is rich with complexity, mystery, and meaning. Jung once said, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart." Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. The woman who lives without a man, by conscious choice, becomes fully awake, not because she has all the answers, but because she has dared to ask the deepest questions. She does not avoid life, she dives into it. She does not close herself to love, she redefines it. She does not reject relationship, she reclaims relationship with herself as primary. Ultimately, this path is not about being against men or above relationships, but about prioritizing wholeness over dependency and truth over tradition. And that is where its power lies, not in rebellion for its own sake, but in the quiet, steady, unwavering devotion to becoming who she truly is. So if you are a woman walking this path, know this: your solitude is not a weakness, but a sacred passage. Your silence is not emptiness, but depth. And your decision to live without a man is not a rejection. It is an invitation to discover who you are when you belong to no one but yourself. This is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of your becoming. Living alone without a man isn't loneliness. It's a return to the self,